This is Marcy. We are going to talk about ACT math today. So welcome. My first thing is just kind of a reminder and a welcome that we are Fiveable, and you got all the social media stuff that you can hit us up on. We are talking about ACT math today. Just kind of stalling a little bit to give you a chance to get in here and join us. Everything good? Good. So what I have up there is the social media that you can find us on. Okay. All right. And again, just to kind of give people a chance to join us, why don't you kind of get used to the chat? I'm going to kind of use that time and turn on our captions so everything is good. And if you would please, let us know how everything is going. There we go. Use the emoji that best describes how you're feeling right now. Some of you have started back to school. Some of you are starting back in the coming days. You got this ACT. You have so much going on. You guys are awesome. Right? So I just wanted to kind of welcome you all, give you that chance to, awesome, thank you. Give us that chance to kind of touch base, see how you're doing, all that good stuff. Excellent. Welcome, everybody. It's nice just to kind of get started and see how you're doing with the platforms, with everything that we're talking about. And I will apologize ahead of time if there is some background noise, but if you miss anything, let me know, okay? Awesome. Welcome. We're so glad to be working with you today. Thought that I would start again, as people are kind of floating in and joining us, welcome. The ACT stands for American College Testing. It is a standardized test that can be taken in addition or instead of the SAT for college admission. Now, my first thing that I would say is you want to look at the colleges that you're considering, and before you pay for both of them, which one, right? It costs money. So look into which exams you should be taking. So some colleges may, just right now with COVID, not need either. Some want one or both or the other. So look into it, right? So today we're just going to be concentrating on the ACT math topics. Okay, so looking at it, this exam lasts 3.5 hours. That does include an optional 40-minute writing portion. Okay, other than the writing portion, this exam is all multiple choice. One main difference from the SAT is that you are allowed to use your calculator on the entire thing. So that's a little different than the SAT. If you were with us during the SAT, we talked about how there is a non-calculator and a calculator part. Okay, so this is different. Calculator allowed on the entire thing. Also a little more science-based for the ACT. Math portion of the exam lasts 60 minutes. There are 60 questions to be completed. So what we did here is we put 6 main topics of the math, how many questions you can expect for each of them. Okay, so we got pre-algebra. Again, this is 60 questions, so double check, those numbers on the right should add up to 60. Pre-algebra, meaning your algebra 1, your middle school, your foundation skills, 14 questions. Elementary algebra, that first algebra class you might have taken in 8th, 9th grade, 10 questions. What they call intermediate algebra, 9 questions. Coordinate geometry, 14 questions. plane geometry, and plane means your XY axis, okay? So in a plane, 2-dimensional plane, 3-dimensional. And trig, 4 questions. So even though that's a smaller amount, please realize that there is trigonometry on the ACT. Everybody good so far? Okay, so next thing I have for you, all math questions are multiple choice. This is, again, another little difference from the SAT, that each question has 4 choices. For the math portion of the ACT, all 60 math questions are multiple choice, 1 correct answer for each of them, and there are 5 choices. So you will choose the best of the 5. Now that's important to know, because sometimes if you put something in your calculator, the answers that are given might not be exact, but there should be one closest answer. All right. So one thing that I do like to say right at the beginning of our review for our ACT, do not panic if the answer given is 10.3, but your answer on your calculator was 10.2. Okay, so it's choose the best answer for each. There should be one that is the best answer or the closest answer. Okay, again, I then repeat, the ACT exam allows the calculator on the entire exam. Bring it. You cannot borrow one when you get to the test site. All right, so you have to bring one. It has to have a charge. If it dies, you take the test without. Okay, so I tell my students, bring 2 calculators and don't loan them out. We all love to share and be nice students, but you are paying money for this, so be selfish in this case, right? If you have 2 calculators, 1 dies, you have a spare, that's great. So don't loan it out. You can't say, ooh, I loaned it to that person over there and I need it. They won't do that for you during the test. Also, an SAT does allow or does give you a formula reference sheet. That's not true of the ACT. So a couple, just to review, big differences. The ACT allows you to use the calculator on the entire exam, but the ACT does not give you any kind of reference sheet or formulas or help. Okay. I also do want to say that we also have an issue where we can't allow, or the ACT does not allow the 89 or the 92 or the Inspire CAS calculator. Okay, so be very careful. What I do is I tell my students, if you're not sure, either ask your teacher or feel free to just go into Ask Siri or go into Google and put in the search bar calculators allowed on the ACT exam, and it'll come up and let you know what calculators are allowed. But those are the big ones that in speaking to students, I've found that I do need to mention to them. It does not, the ACT exam does not allow computer algebra systems calculators on the exam. Okay. So again, if you're like having questions, feel free, let us know. But I find that that's the easiest way, just to put it in the Google search. All right. So in this stream, you may have found out when you signed up for this, what we're going to talk about is the most asked math questions and topics from the ACT. Those happen to fall into the categories of algebra, statistics, and integrating your math skills. Okay. All right. So what I did for the rest of the slides, that was kind of 10 minutes. And I know I spoke quickly. So at any time you feel free, I'm looking at the chat. Pooja is also in there working on the chat with you guys. So if you have any questions, toss them in the chat. One of us will get to you. The rest of the time, though, we're going to do some problems that kind of show up a lot on the ACT exam. At the top of each slide, it'll tell you what the topic is, like what question that comes from. And then we can answer the questions or any problems that we have in the chat. We can kind of go through how might my students or how might I use a calculator to help me on this. It is true that the ACT, you absolutely can pass without a calculator. The only reason I keep talking about a calculator is a calculator falls into the topics of the ACT where they're testing on speed and accuracy. What I mean by that is you have paid money to take a timed test. So while all of these absolutely can be done without a calculator, there are some times that you just might question, what is 2/3 of 24? Right? And so instead of questioning it or taking a long time to do something you might have forgotten how to do, you can just kind of plug it in your calculator and move on. So that calculator skills helps you with the speed and accuracy. Okay? All right. Close that window, please. All right, so moving along, we're looking at pre-algebra. Okay, so again, I'm going to kind of try and concentrate on the most asked questions that I notice. And you just kind of keep letting us know. I'm just trying to cut down a little on the outside noise for you a little bit. Easy errors especially. Yeah, check these calculations. Thank you, Pooja. Easy to miss errors, especially when you're working quickly, something that we just want you to be mindful of, right? Again, this is a test that you paid money for, so we really want you to do as well as you can. So in this problem, you are given 7 numbers. They're all integers, whole numbers, no decimals. 7 students took an art history exam. Their scores are listed above. Which of the following statements is true? Okay. Now I chose this because my students hate these kind of questions. All right. So I kind of went to this studypoint.com and you'll see where, if I took some examples or pictures, my students hate that 1 only, 2 only, 2 and 3, right? So I'm going to kind of put a timer on and see how that works for you. And let's see if we can give you maybe 20 seconds. Okay. I will talk through this, and I hope that that's not a problem for anybody. But if you are just sitting there not having a clue, it's what these terms mean. I don't want you just sitting there for 20 minutes either, 20 seconds. So this one said the average is greater than 70, but I put in parentheses arithmetic mean. And so I want you to realize that those are interchangeable. Some people see the word average, some people see the word mean, but if they also put in arithmetic mean, I want you to recognize that they're all the same thing, right? And the mean is add them all up and divide by how many you have. So again, I mentioned at the top, you have 7 scores, add them up, divide by 7. Okay. The mode, for me, what I remind my students is mode means most. So mode means most. Looking at those, what number, if any, happens the most? And then median, that's the one that median means middle, but you have to remember to put them in order. Now, my students like to say, well, which order? Smallest to biggest or biggest to smallest? It doesn't matter. So you were taught one way, right? But I do want you to realize it doesn't matter because the middle is the middle. If you go from least to greatest or greatest to smallest, it doesn't matter. Okay? So talking through that, those are my definitions. Mean. Let's see what you get. Anybody want to put in the chat what they think? What choice are you thinking? I love that at least we're seeing a couple people risk it and take a guess. Let's check it out, right? when we add those, because we got a plethora, right? A bunch of different answers coming in. I did see one person got it right. Okay. What I wrote here on each page, I have one question and then I have my thoughts for it. Okay. So, will you calculate mean and median by hand or using technology? If you are a Texas Instrument state or user, you absolutely can put all 5 of those in. So you can go into stats, edit, put them into a list. You can name them tests. You can leave it unnamed. It doesn't matter. And then you can run 1 bar stats. Or some people just use their paper, right? And I think I saw a couple seconds ago somebody said, can I write on the test paper, right? Yep. So some people will do this by hand. All right. So I just said there's no correct answer if you're going to have your calculator do it or do it by hand. It doesn't make a difference. But whichever way you do, you should get an average of about 58.6. My median or middle is 70. And my mode, there were 3 occurrences of 80. So that was my mode is 80, not 3. It happened 3 times, but my mode is 80. So yay, go you if you got B. Awesome job. And if not, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to go back to the question that if you want to take a picture of it, that is fine. Mean, median, mode, absolutely considered pre-algebra, but of course it also falls into statistics. Okay. I said that answer is B, gave you the answers there so you can kind of think about it. Feel free to keep that chat going if you do have questions. Okay. Next one, I did a little geometry. You love it or you hate it, right? So in the plane geometry here, you have coordinate geometry and plane geometry, which they do consider different. Okay. So looking at this, to some students, this is like really weird. It's just a little abstract, right? It says you have this square, right? So if you are like a circle, key terms, that kind of thing, it says line M intersects the square as shown. What must the value of x plus y be? Okay. Now, the issue I have, or the issue my students have when I kind of look at this kind of problem, I have some kids that just get really fixated on the fact that it says line M, but there's no arrows at the end of either M. Okay. That's right. Put the arrows in if that bothers you, right? If that's something that bothers you. Also, so I would think of line M is something that's important. I would notice the word square, which is important. And then I would think of, okay, must means absolutely has to be true. So it's not sometimes true, it must be true. So what that means to me is there has to be a geometry rule, one of those long things that we were told we had to memorize. Okay, so as I'm looking at this, I have a couple things that I notice. All right, so I have this picture here. I do need to know that all 4 sides are equal, but the main important thing, and all 4 sides or all angles are right angle, that's important too. But the thing that I do have to recognize is that opposite sides are parallel, okay? So if those vertical sides are equal to each other in length, but they're also parallel, that makes M be a transversal. Transversal doesn't matter if you know that fancy word, but if you are somebody that's like feeling good about it, then yep, that is the official term. So line M is a transversal that cuts those vertical sides. Okay. All right. So I kind of spoke through it now. On the next slide, I have like 3 bullets of things that I was thinking to get me going. Right? So the shape is a square, so opposite sides are parallel. That means line M is called a transversal. And also, do you remember rules about a transversal? So some of my students call it a Z rule, or they think angles on the opposite sides, interior opposite angles, right? Those are congruent. There's a rule for geometry that's a little less well known. And what that is angles on the same side of a transversal are supplementary. Supplementary means they add up to 180 degrees. I once had a student say to me recently, X and Y don't look equal. And I was told if they don't look equal, they add up to 180. Great. That is absolutely always going to be true. Okay. I just sometimes hesitate to say that's a rule, right? Because it's not an official geometry rule. Okay. So when I look at that, I'm going to go, I said the shape is a square, so opposite sides are parallel. Line M is known as a transversal. Angles on the same side of a transversal are supplements, so it is true that x plus y is 180. That answers the question on the previous page that said, what must be true about x plus y? X plus y has to be 180. So again, I'm going to go back. What must the value of x plus y be? It doesn't ask what x is. It asks what must be true about those two. When I add them up, they are supplementary, which means they add up to 180. Okay. Awesome. Moving along, at least my students, we tend to have to come back to and review a little bit exponents, radicals, different roots, that kind of thing. Okay, so I would consider this an algebra topic, and we're talking about, maybe rational exponents. Okay, now, depending on the calculator that you're using, you can not a CAS, right? So depending on that calculator, maybe you want to write this in, enter it into the calculator kind of in different steps. What I mean by that, if I do the fourth root of 129, okay, there is a button for that you can use on your calculator. Some of you might put in your calculator some of the choices, right? F and G here have sixes. And so sometimes I will just say, hey, the one that looks similar to each other, that's probably it. So it might be F or G. Not always true, right? But what you could do is 6 times 6 times 6 times 6. Does it equal to 129? Because what that means is what number to the fourth power gives me 1296. Not 129, sorry. Okay, so I can either do the fourth root, or I can do, in parentheses, 1296 raised to the 0.25, right, or 1/4 power. Either is fine. Oh, yay, I'm seeing some answers come in. Okay, now for me, for my students, what I tell my students is we have to remember that when we're doing the fourth root of 12, we really are raising a power to a power. 12 to the 1/4 power, or a quarter of 12, is 3. Okay. So I'm loving it. Everybody that did brave it out and put it into the chat, you guys are on fire. I'm going to, again, just kind of go here and say, this is how I thought of it kind of separately. The fourth root can be thought of as to the 1/4 power, or 0.25. I tend to put those separately just because if I just put the number in, maybe I'm not really good with variables, but I can eliminate a few of the choices, right? So 3 of the 4 choices went out the window when I eliminated them by doing the 1/4 power, or the 0.25 power of 1296. So you guys are right. F is the correct answer. Okay, very good so far. You keep those questions coming if you need anything, okay? Now we're back to algebra. I would not say that this is not like introductory algebra. This is like algebra 2, right when you're ready to get college credit for something. This is called a composition of functions or composition of algebraic functions. Okay. And I will tell you, it depends on what kind of state you're in, whether you learn this before the ACT or not. So for some, it might actually be a pre-calculus topic. So it just kind of depends. And some of you are just jumping on it already. Let's see. Okay. Now, I've heard students say they think of this as an inside out. Which they mean they're taking the innermost rule, doing it, and then coming to the outside. So they think of inside out. That absolutely is fine. But another way to think of it is you are just doing order of operations, right? The innermost, or H of 2, is the first thing. These are just rule following. So what I mean by that is go to the H rule and put 2 in there. So I go to my H rule and I put 2 in there. I'm going to do 2 to the third power plus 2. And I absolutely can just put that right in my calculator, right? 2 to the third power plus 2. Let my calculator do that. If you are just really somebody that you love this stuff doing by hand, it's absolutely true. My mistake that sometimes my students make is 2 to the third power is 6, because they think 2 times 3 instead of 2 times 2 times 2. Okay. Did not happen. Those of you who are putting it out in the chat, you're absolutely right. What I get is 8 plus 2 is 10. So what I did is I just kind of wrote it out. So I went to the rule for H. I put 2 in there. So I did 2 to the third power plus 2 is 10. So 2 to the third power is 8 plus 2 is 10. Right? Then think of it as a math relay. Like if you have any kind of math competitions or math team, it's that answer now becomes the input for the next one. So I'm going to take the answer that I just received, or the answer that I have is 10, and put it into the G rule. That G rule is 2x plus 3. So 2 times 10 is 20, plus 3 is 23. So looks like, again, those who are brave enough to try that in the chat, you absolutely got it right. Everybody doing well so far? We're about halfway through. No questions? Everybody's good? Okay, I'm going to move along then. Let's look at a little bit more geometry. Sure, Lily, absolutely. The question is, will I leave some questions, time for questions at the end? Yes, absolutely. Okay. Or if you have a burning question right now, toss it in the chat and one of us will get to you. Okay. Also, if I go too fast or you just kind of, it's in your brain that you're just going back to one of those questions, that's fine. You can toss that in the chat as well. And we can go back to one of these questions. Because I know some of you are like, you're all going to be better at one form of math than the other. So we can come back and look at any of these. Okay. All right. So the graph of a certain hyperbola is shown in the coordinate plane below. So this, of course, falls into the coordinate plane geometry. Among the following graphs, which represents y equals negative h of x? Okay, so I'm kind of giving you a second. I've seen, 3 people kind of threw answers in, which is fine. I'm going to kind of give you 10 seconds. I will kind of maybe I'll just be quiet for 10 seconds. Okay, so just kind of, keeping it real, thinking about what my students, it bothers my students when they don't have an equation that they can put in the calculator to get that picture. Okay, so everything is letters, nothing's an equation. How can I get that? Right? They didn't even give you a scale on that to try and kind of figure it out. So kudos. It is true that F is going to be my correct answer here, right? But what I want to think about is, what the heck does that mean? Because some of us are probably looking at this going, I have no clue. I got stuck on the word hyperbola, right? So hyperbola is just exactly what it looks like. Some people think of it as like an egg or an ellipse that's kind of cut in half and turned inside out, right? Either way, they really kind of skipped that and said, you have a picture drawn here. What's the best way to represent negative h of x? So what we need to concentrate on here, and again, I have this on the next slide, but just as we're looking at this with the choices, this is a negation of the entire thing. So what it really means is the negation of y. So in a geometry class, hopefully you at some point, I know you learned it at some point, in a geometry class, you were told that when we negate y, we reflect in the x-axis. So if that popped into your brain, it was easy. But if not, you're like, yeah, no idea. I got stuck at hyperbola, right? So this question can be pretty intimidating. So if we could translate this, and I tell my students, I just think of math as another foreign language, right? Like all the different foreign languages you might be learning in school. This one says, if you negate the whole thing or negate y, that's equivalent or the same as reflection in the x-axis. This is the x-axis, the horizontal one. If I reflect or flip it upside down, flip it over the x-axis, this dotted line called an asymptote stays the same. So right away, it's not going to be G. Okay? Then when I reflect it over the x-axis, think of it as going from bottom to top, right? Flipping it upside down. So there goes H, because I didn't do anything to the left-hand side, so that's wrong. I and J, part of it's missing. So that's an issue as well. Okay. So what I wrote here is, when I see negative of h of x, that means negation of the entire thing. And that means that the y is negated, also known as a reflection in the x-axis. And so, like I said, F is the correct answer. Just kind of checking the stream. Looks like everything is good. Doing good? Okay. And of course, we are going to keep another geometry question, but this is one a little more not in coordinate geometry. Okay. So I'll read the question and then I will give you some time to look at it. So one side of square PQRS has a length of 21 inches. A certain rectangle whose area is equal to the area of PQRS has a width of 9. What is the length of the certain rectangle? So I will kind of give you a second, 10 seconds. Are you sure? Okay, I did see the question from Hi over in the chat, and I will get back to you in just 1 second. Let's finish this one, and then we'll go back to what does negating X look like. Okay, so a couple of things that to me when I'm reading this problem, especially if reading is an issue for you, right? So now we're getting into a little more robust, a little bit tougher because the reading is an issue, right? They didn't draw me a picture. They wrote it out in words. So I kind of have to figure this out. Do I need to draw a picture? What are the key terms? So for me, the fact that it is a square, that's important. That tells me that not only one side is 21, but all the sides are 21. And then it's talking about a rectangle, and it says the word area. So for me, I think of area of PQRS is 21 times 21, right? And then the area of a rectangle is 9 times something. Because the area of a rectangle is length times width, they told me 9 is the width. They're saying find the length, okay? So for me, I said the areas are equal. I had to pick that out from the question. What I mean by that, it says one side of the square is 21. It really doesn't say what's the area of that square, but it says you have a rectangle whose area is equal to 21 times 21, right? So for me, I have to find the length. So my big thing is I had to be able to translate that for myself. So what I said is, it is true that the area of the square is 21 times 21, or 21 squared. That is going to be equal to the area of the rectangle, which is 9 times length. So I let my calculator, again, I could do that, but the calculator can do it quicker for me maybe. So I got 441 equals 9 times length. When I divide by 9, called opposite operations or inverse operations, I then got 49, or choice C. So again, those of you who wrote that down, fantastic. I also got the answer C. Okay, what I want to do is go back a second, because I said here, negative of the whole thing means the y is negated, which is equivalent to a reflection in the x-axis. So I said, what's negating the x look like? Again, they go just opposite. So negating the x is reflecting in the y. Right? So negating the y means reflect over the x. So this is a great rule. Negating the x means reflect over the y. So they're opposite each other. So I'm going to show you visually what that looks like. So I take this, when I negate the whole thing or negate the y, I flip over the x. So I flip from here down below. And I flip from here up top. If instead the x, so not the before the h, but if this negative sign was in here in the parentheses with the x, what I tell my students is negating just the x means reflect in the y-axis. How that looks visually is I flip left to right. Okay, that does mean that the dotted line would move over to the other side, and it would look more like G. Okay, so this is a great question. I love that question, Hi, that said, what's negating x look like? So if instead of that negative sign being before the h, if instead it was in the parentheses with the x, the answer would be G instead. Very good with that? So great question. Okay, now tossing out some percentages. Let's see, of course. There we go. All right. So back to algebra. Some may consider this as pre-algebra because it is true. You might do this in like middle school. I count this, though. This was a little harder than the percentages that you do in pre-algebra. So this one was considered an algebra. Okay. So again, I'm going to read the question and then I'll give you 20 seconds to try this. It says, of the 800 lunch orders on Tuesday at Papa's Pizzeria, 40% of the orders requested extra cheese. Of those that do not order extra cheese, 20% of those orders requested mushrooms. How many of the orders that did not request cheese did not request mushrooms? I'm going to start the timer. I'll give you 20 seconds and then we'll talk. Okay, I'm seeing a couple people kind of put their answers in to the chat. So enough to tell me that, some people got the answer and some might need a little bit of talk. Okay, so my thoughts here are, this is a little complex, especially if you're somebody that, gets a little distracted, or this is like 4 lines of text. It's almost like reading comprehension, right? It's like a word problem, which some people just freak out by that. And we don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to think about this as translating math to English, or English to math. So I have this English paragraph, and I want to think about, what does it mean? Okay, so first of all, I have 800 lunch orders at the pizza shop. 40% of, so first thing we need to know is that a lot of the graphing calculators do not have a percent key. So you need to know that 40% means 0.4 or 4/10. Okay, of means multiply. So my first step is 0.4 times 800. That's the number that did require right? So what I did, and I hope it'll be helpful how I kind of spoke through this, and I have formulas. I also did a tree diagram on the next page. So hopefully that'll help as well, if you're somebody that just doesn't like these kind of questions. Are we back up? It looks like the stream went down for some people. Can you let me know if you can hear me? It's back up now. Okay. And can you see the question? Do you need me to give you 20 seconds again? It's back up. If you can't see it, refresh. Thank you, Pooja. Good. Okay, so let me go back just to the question. Let everybody kind of refresh, get caught up. Good. So if you're just kind of getting back to seeing this, if you can hear me but you can't see it, or vice versa, all you need to do is hit refresh. Try and refresh your screen. See if you can kind of get back with us. What we were talking about is 800 lunch orders. So they could have made it a little easier by saying 800 people ordered pizza. 40%, or 0.4 of those, almost half, 0.4 asked for extra cheese. Of those that did not order extra cheese, so I got to find out how many did not ask for extra cheese, and then multiply that number by 0.2. Right? That's how many did ask for mushrooms. But what I need to know is how many that did not request extra cheese also not ask for mushrooms. And so that's where some people are like, oh, it's a not. That means they did. No, that's not true for this case, right? I know some people, right? They like, oh, my teacher told me a double negative is a positive. This is a little different though. Okay, so we want to make sure that we can read the question and figure out what they're asking. Okay. So like I was saying, when it kind of went down, I did this a couple ways. One, if you really struggle with this, if you're good with the algebra, perfect. If you just want something, some people do really well with just these little tree diagrams, right? So I'm not showing the math here, but what I'm saying is how many people asked for extra cheese? 40%. So what I have up top said, or my calculator said 0.4 times 800. That's 320. So 320 asked for extra cheese. How many people did not? Well, I know altogether it's 800. So 800 minus 320 is 480. So I know that 480 did not ask for extra cheese. Now what it says is, of those 480, right, 20% want mushrooms. So I showed the math here and I said, so 0.2 times 480 is 96. So 96 did ask for mushrooms. Again, I subtracted that because together these have to add up to 480. So I did 480 minus 96. That tells me that 384 did not ask for extra mushrooms. So sometimes if you struggle for this or with this kind of stuff, the tree diagram might actually help you, right? You might have learned this in like a middle school probability, statistics, that kind of stuff. And some of you might do well with thinking about that as a tree diagram instead. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back here. So how many did not ask for mushrooms? This one was just different for you guys, and I think it's because we lost the stream maybe, but I didn't have anybody put in the chat what they thought their answer was. So before I give it to you, I'll maybe give you 20 more seconds to kind of think of that. How would you do it? Is this one a little worse? Good. Again, I did see some choices come through. Everybody in the chat is getting it right now. I just want to kind of re-look at that and make sure, because I thought that was a tough one, right? A lot of, you found one answer, but we think of that in statistics and probability as the complement of it. So the total minus what we found. And we had to do that twice. So that was a little more difficult. But I do agree that the answer was C. Okay. I'm thinking now, I kind of paused a little bit. I think everybody's kind of caught back up with us and doing okay. All right. A trig word problem. So I will read it and then I will, I think on this one, give you maybe a minute. Let's get my timer ready. Okay. So Bobby wants to determine the height of a diving platform shown below. She measures the angle of elevation to the top of the platform at a point 25 feet along level ground from the jump point on the platform. That angle of elevation is 52 degrees. Which of the following expressions gives the approximation for the height of the diving platform in feet? I will set the timer to try and be quiet for a minute. Ten seconds. Okay, let's look at this. Again, I thought that this got a little more difficult. Again, trig is not something that you might all have had early on, right? So we're starting to talk about trig. We also have almost a word problem, right? It's a paragraph given to us. Now, I thought this one could have been worse because I actually covered up the picture to try and think how difficult would this be if they didn't give me the idea of a platform, right? So first couple things as I'm looking at this, did you learn some kind of way to remember? Good. Oh, Lily, some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. I've heard some old horse caught another horse taking oats away. The one I discourage my students from using is Oscar had a heap of apples. And it's not that it's wrong. I just like Lily said, I like something that has all 9, because if you had the Oscar had, you don't remember that that's sign, right? So there are different mnemonics that you absolutely can remember. Some people, good, like Tanisha said, I just have a lot of students that just keep it with SOHCAHTOA, right? To me, it always sounded like Pocahontas for some reason, right? But SOHCAHTOA, I really like that Daniel said the same thing. And that is everything in order. So if you see that in the chat, sine is opposite over a hypotenuse. That is just the proportion. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I'm leaving it here just so we can kind of look at it, because here is the angle, and from that, the question mark is opposite. So I want to kind of think of this. From the right angle, the longest side is always the hypotenuse. So this is always the hypotenuse. Across from, and think of if somebody lives on the opposite side of the road, or if their locker is on the opposite side of the hallway from you, right? That's the other side. So the across the other side of the triangle from the 52 is the question mark. That's the opposite. Adjacent means touching. If somebody's house is adjacent to yours, or apartment, or anything, right? They're next door to you. They're right next to you. So the 25 is adjacent to the 52. The question mark is opposite from the 52. And the one that's not marked at all is the hypotenuse of that triangle. Okay? So thinking of that, and the, yeah, good, Lily. Yeah, that works too. Yep, whatever works. And so looking at that, how can I come up with the question mark, right? So I personally wrote a math sentence using Trig. And what I did is I looked at the 52, and the question mark is the opposite, and the 25 is the adjacent. The one that has the opposite and the adjacent is tan. So what I did is I kind of said trig for right triangles, SOHCAHTOA. The sides of the triangle marked are the opposite and the adjacent. So I came up with this math sentence that said the tan of 52 is equal to the question mark over 25. Whether you think of it as a proportion and you cross multiply, or use your inverse or opposite operations, what it's asking you to do is find an equation, right? What's the approximation for the height of the diving platform? That might have been some confusion. What they could have said is, give me a sentence for the question mark, or solve for the question mark. So I took the sentence I came up with, which is the tan 52 equals question mark over 25. And what I'm looking to do is get the question mark alone. So where I wrote cross multiply, you also could think the opposite operation of dividing, or what's the opposite of divide by 25 is multiply by 25, right? And so I apologize. I'm just noticing in my slides here, this should be a times right here instead of a divide. I apologize. So my correct answer should be 25 times the tan of 52. And notice they didn't even put the times in there, but K should be the correct answer. Okay, so it is true that I got K. All right. We are doing great on time. Yes, I absolutely, Lily, will take an imaginary numbers problem. So that's what I kind of came up with, or what we worked through. You are awesome. You got this. Right? Don't go in thinking you're just going to guess the answers. It used to be true that if in doubt, C is the correct answer. That's not true anymore, right? With computers coming up with and generating these questions and the choices and all that good stuff is not going to get you through anymore. Okay, so we absolutely want you to do well on the ACT. Don't guess, right? Try with math. Don't say, if in doubt, I'll go with this answer, right? That's not going to be the way to pass the test anymore. Okay. I'm going to kind of leave it on this screen for a second. And it just says, thank you. Shoot us an email. We are always here. We can help you, whatever you need. Meanwhile, Lily asked a question in the chat. And so I am going to just kind of, there's all of our social media. Send us an email, however we can help. We are here for you. We will help you however we can. But I'm going to just write down the question that Lily had. And it's, what's the product of the complex numbers negative 3i plus 4 and positive 3i plus 4? Okay. Now, you may or may not have heard of the word conjugates. In a foreign language like Spanish, we could conjugate verbs. This is the same kind of thing. We also call a conjugate for math the difference of two squares. So we have the 4s are both positive. The 3i's, one is positive, one is negative. Okay. Now, what we have, those are called conjugates. Right? And what it means is, think of x plus 2, x minus 2. That's a difference of two squares. We could do the same thing, 4 plus 3i and 4 minus 3i. Okay, so these are a difference of two perfect squares. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about this as negative 3i. So I'm going to just kind of write this in the chat. Negative 3i times 3i is going to be my first part. I'm going to have my first, outer, inner, last. So if I even just think about foiling these, my two first terms are the negative 3i and the positive 3i gives me negative 9i squared. It is true, nobody said it yet, but you absolutely can put this in a graphing calculator. Your graphing calculator can do this for you. Okay, my outers is going to be negative 3i times 4. My outers is going to be 3i times 4, and my last is going to be 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, so I have negative 9i squared minus 12 I plus 12i plus 16. That's what I would have next. So I have my negative 9i squared. My inners and outers, notice that negative 12i and the 12i cancel. So I have negative 9. My I squared is negative 1 plus 16. Okay, so the negative 12i and the 12i cancel. What I'm left with is 9 plus 16. So my final answer is going to be 25. Right, so they have 4 plus 3i, 4 minus 3i. So I would have 16 plus 9, or 25. Okay, we want to remember, yeah, good. We want to remember, good. Yes, I was just going to say, remember that I is the square root of negative 1, and I squared is negative 1. Right, comes with the pattern. After 4 terms, it repeats again. Okay. All right. We got any last questions? Anything else we can help you with? 5 choices, calculator on the entire thing. 60 minutes, 60 questions. Watch your time. Use your calculator to help you. Speed and accuracy is a big thing. Okay, looks like we're slowing down on the chat, so we want to be mindful of your time. Have a question, shoot us an email at hi@fiveable.me. Keep in touch with us on social media, and you are awesome. You got this. You can add, you're going to do awesome on the ACT math. Have a great day. Have a great long weekend, guys. Take care. Bye.